La Fortuna had been built for people who like to pretend the world outside didn't exist. Soft white light poured from chandeliers, shaped like frozen rain. Crystal glasses glowed faintly against deep mahogany tables. Conversations flowed in a low, cultivated murmur, punctuated by the clink of expensive cutlery and the muted sigh of waiters gliding across the floor. At the far corner, where the room naturally bent around him, Dominic Vale sat like a fixed point the rest of the evening, quietly orbited. He was not the loudest man in the restaurant. He never was. His voice rarely rose. And when it did, it was from necessity, not emotion. He wore a charcoal suit tailored with the kind of precision that hinted at both wealth and the refusal to waste anything time. Fabric. Or words. His dark hair was trimmed clean at the edges. His jaw shadowed with the kind of stubble that looked deliberate rather than lazy. Around him, his men filled the table with their bodies and the air with clipped reports. Shipment cleared the docks last night. Customs officer has been paid through December. We moved the cash through the usual route. No flags. They spoke in low tones, never quite meeting his eyes unless they had to. One of them tapped a finger on a ledger, then stopped when he noticed the way Dominic's gaze flicked toward the movement. A glass of Barolo rested near his hand. Owen touched, as if he liked the idea of the wine more than the act of drinking it. No one in La Fortuna had to be told who he was. You felt it in the way the room allowed a small radius of silence around his table, as if sound itself knew better than to intrude. You saw it in the way waiters approached, with slightly straighter backs and slightly shallower breaths. Even the owner hovered at the bar, washing the same glass twice, pretending to be casual while glancing at the corner every 30 seconds. Power was not in the gun under his jacket, or the cars waiting outside. Power was in the fact that every person in that room knew that if Dominic Vale chose to end their evening, nothing would stop him, and yet he sat there quietly, reading a set of numbers that would never appear on any official ledger. He lifted his fork, the tines catching the chandelier light, and paused mid-air. The doors opened. A gust of cold air slipped into the restaurant. Rude and uninvited. It touched the back of his neck, like a hand made of winter and cigarette smoke. Dominic didn't turn. He didn't have to. He sensed the change, the way a predator senses another heartbeat in the brush. Conversations faltered. One couple near the entrance fell completely silent. A waiter, mid-step, and misjudged the distance to a table, and had to correct himself. Children did not come into La Fortuna. They especially did not come in alone. But the small figure walking in from the doorway walked as if no one had told her the rules. She couldn't have been more than 7. Dark hair pulled back in a quick, practical ponytail. A thin dress, clean but tired at the seams, hung on her small frame. Her shoes were scuffed at the toes, the leather worn white, where it had met concrete too many times. The hostess stepped forward, smile already forming, then hesitated, as if she'd suddenly forgotten every greeting she knew. The girl's eyes didn't move toward her. They didn't move at all. Really. They were locked on the far corner. On him. Dominic watched her in the reflection of his wineglass before he watched her directly. She moved through the maze of tables, with a precision that felt wrong on someone so small. She never brushed a chair. Never collided with a waiter. People stared openly now. Forks hovering unused. No one stopped her. There was something in the deliberate line of her path that suggested trying might be a mistake. One of Dominic's men began to shift in his seat, hand drifting toward his jacket. Dominic didn't look at him. He didn't need to. A thought moved through him like muscle memory. His index finger twitched barely a centimeter off the table. The man froze. The rest of them followed. The girl reached his table and came to a stop so close he could have counted every eyelash if he'd cared to. She smelled faintly of winter air and bus exhaust. Her chin lifted. Her eyes met his. There was fear in them. But it had been folded and pressed beneath something heavier. Determination. Desperation. A decision already made. Her hand rose. Small fingers closed over the lapel of his coat. Right above his heartbeat. The fabric wrinkled under her grip. The restaurant held its breath. When she spoke, her voice was clear. Each word pressed flat to keep it from shaking. "Your men hurt my mother," she said. "She needs you." The fork in Dominic's hand hovered. Forgotten. Still catching the light. Across the table, one of his lieutenants sucked in a breath, as if he could pull the words back out of the air and undo them. Someone at a nearby table whispered something like, "Oh my God." But the sound died quickly, swallowed by the thick silence settling over La Fortuna. Dominic looked down at the small hand gripping his coat. He had seen grown men shaking so hard they couldn't hold a cigarette. He had watched seasoned killers stammer in front of him, tongues stumbling over excuses and lies. He had watched men much larger than this child forget how to breathe. Her fingers were steady. He set the fork down with deliberate care. The soft click of metal on porcelain sounded unnaturally loud. "What is your name?" he asked. No threat. No anger. Just curiosity wrapped in velvet. "Aria," she said. "Aria Moretti." The name slid into his memory, already filing itself away with connections and possibilities. Moretti. Familiar enough to matter. It's not enough to mean anything yet. "And your mother?" he asked. "What's her name?" "Elena Moretti." The answer came fast. "Rehearsed. She fixes violins. On Vescari Street. Near the bakery with the blue sign." His eyes sharpened. He remembered that street. He remembered a narrow shop front he had passed a dozen times. The window full of instruments that had nothing to do with his world, and everything to do with someone else's. She was taken. Aria continued. "By a man who works for you. He wears your colors. He said he was doing it for you." Dominic heard his men stop breathing. "How long ago?" he asked. 2 days. Her jaw tightened. "She hasn't come home." 2 days. That was a long time in his world. He leaned back slightly, studying her as if she were a piece of evidence he hadn't asked for, but now couldn't ignore. Hairdress. Washed, but old. Her hair. Brushed quickly. A few strands escaping. Shadows beneath her eyes that didn't belong on a face that young. "Who told you I could help you?" he asked. "I asked." Aria said simply. "People in the street. I asked where the man in charge eats. They told me you come here." Of course they did. He turned his head a fraction. One of his lieutenants was already waiting for the signal. Dominic didn't need to use words. He never had to. A nod. So small, most people would have missed it. Passed between them. The man rose from his chair and slipped away, disappearing toward the back exit, where phones could ring and orders could move faster than questions. Aria's hand did not leave his coat. "You walked here?" Aria Dominic asked. "Yes." She glanced down at her shoes. Then back up. "It took 3 buses and some walking." "You did that alone. My mother wasn't there to tell me not to." The answer landed somewhere heavy in his chest. He didn't acknowledge it. Around them, the restaurant tried to pretend it wasn't listening. Forks moved again. Slowly. Glasses lifted and lowered. But every ear was tuned to the small island of silence at the corner table. Dominic reached for his water glass and slid it across the table toward her. "Drink," he said. It wasn't a command. It was a simple observation that she needed to. She hesitated. Eyes flicking from the glass to his face, as if weighing the cost of accepting anything from him. Then she picked it up with both hands and drank. Water spilled a little over her fingers, down her wrist. But she didn't stop. When she set the glass down, her hand went right back to his coat. gripping even tighter. Minutes stretched. La Fortuna's polished quiet turned into a pressure chamber. Waiters avoided their corner entirely now, circling far around like a rock in a river. Dominic didn't rush the silence. Part of power was understanding that not all answers arrived on demand. Part of power was knowing when waiting was more useful than pushing. His lieutenant reappeared at his side, moving with the controlled urgency of a man, carrying bad news to someone who didn't tolerate it. He bent down, mouth close to Dominic's ear. Dominic listened without moving. The only visible reaction was the way his jaw clenched once, the muscle jumping beneath the skin. The abduction wasn't authorized. The man finished in a whisper, meant only for him. This was done in your name. In your name. Dominic's fingers curled once on the table, then relaxed. Fury moved through him. Not hot but cold, settling into the places where calculations lived. His name was a currency. It bought loyalty and fear in equal measure. It moved product, shifted alliances, pushed doors open that should have stayed closed. It did not get spent on personal errands and stupidity. He looked at Arya. Someone wearing his colors had taken her mother and hung the debt across his shoulders without his consent. Dominic rose from his chair. The movement was unhurried, but the air changed. Power stood with him. Arya's hand, still locked on his coat, forced her to step closer so she wouldn't lose her grip. She tilted her head back to meet his eyes again. Where did he take her? Dominic asked his lieutenant, his gaze never leaving Arya's face. Old freight warehouse on the edge of the river. The man said quietly. The one we use for overflow sometimes. Dominic nodded once, as if the location were a simple detail, and not a problem that had just become personal. He looked down at the girl. At the small circle her fingers had wrinkled into his coat. Arya, he said, voice level, almost gentle. You came here to bring me a problem. She swallowed but didn't let go. Yes? You did it knowing who I am. Yes? You understand I'm not a policeman. I don't file reports. I don't talk things through. Her chin lifted a fraction. I don't need a report, she said. I need my mother. Something in him moved, like ice cracking under the slow pressure of spring. For a second, he saw her not as a disruption to his evening, not as an error in his organization, but as a child who had mapped out bus routes and street corners just to put her hand on the lapel of the one man everyone else knew better than to touch. He didn't owe the city much. He didn't owe the world anything. But he owed his name. Dominic's voice dropped, steady and final. Take me to her. Arya's fingers tightened, as if she believed the entire world could shift on that one sentence. Around them, La Fortuna's patrons watched in stunned silence as Dominic Vale, the man whose word rearranged the city, let a 7-year-old girl lead him out of the restaurant. The city changed as they drove. La Fortuna's polished glass and soft light gave way to streets where the pavement had more scars than paint. Neon signs flickered over shuttered storefronts. Old brick warehouses leaned toward the river like tired men resting on their elbows. The car's engine was the only steady sound in a landscape full of broken noises. Arya sat beside Dominic in the back seat. Her hands folded so tightly in her lap her knuckles were white. She stared straight ahead, not out the window, as if she was afraid that if she looked away from the road, the world might rearrange itself, and her mother would disappear again. Dominic watched her from the corner of his eye. She didn't fidget. She didn't cry. The only sign that she was a child, and not some small, driven spirit wearing a human body was the soft hitch in her breathing. Every time they passed a street she recognized. How did you find the warehouse? He asked quietly. I followed him, she said. The night he took her, he let that sink in. You followed a grown man who was taking your mother, he said. Alone. At night. She swallowed. I stayed behind the trucks. He didn't see me. I couldn't get inside. There were other men, and I was afraid if they saw me, they'd take me too. It wasn't the fear that caught him. It was the way she said it, like a logistical detail in a larger plan. We're here. Boss. The driver said. The car slowed, turning into a cracked lot where weeds pushed up through old asphalt. The second car pulled in behind them, headlights sweeping across corrugated metal and broken windows patched with plywood. The old factory sat at the edge of the river, its frame black against the sky, one of Dominic's warehouses. On paper used for storage. In reality, used for the kind of business that preferred shadows. Two men stood by the rolling metal door, their posture shifting from bored to upright the moment they recognized the cars. One of them instinctively reached for his weapon, then froze as he saw who stepped out. Dominic's shoes hit the ground with unhurried weight. The air smelled of rust, oil, and river water. A train horn sounded somewhere far away, long and low, like something calling through fog. Arya scrambled out behind him. As if distance itself was a threat she refused to allow. She hovered at his side, not touching him now, but close enough that his coat brushed her shoulder every time he moved. Open it, Dominic said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The men rushed to comply, tugging at chains and mechanisms until the door rolled upward with a teeth-grinding shriek. Cold air spilled from the darkness inside, thinner and sharper than the night air outside. The lights were on, but only barely. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, swinging slightly, throwing pale circles over concrete and stacked crates. Shadows pooled in the corners, like something alive. Dominic stepped inside. The guards who'd been waiting inside went still when they saw him. Weapons were already visible at their belts, but their hands moved away from them, as if by reflex. One of them dropped his gaze so fast it was almost a bow. He didn't look at them. He was already scanning the room for what he had come to find. Arya didn't wait for permission. She darted past him, footsteps echoing off concrete, heading straight toward the darkest corner of the warehouse, toward a shape curled against the wall, half hidden behind crate. Mum. The word cracked open the silence like a thrown stone. The figure shifted, uncoiling slowly from the wall. A woman pushed herself upright, one hand still braced against the concrete. Bruises colored her face in layers, purple blooming over yellow, green, fading at the edges. Her lips were split. Her hair, once carefully pulled back, now escaped in tangled strands. But her eyes were clear. They found her daughter first, taking in every inch of her in a single, ruthless scan, checking for injuries, for missing pieces. Only when Arya reached her and wrapped small arms around her waist did the woman exhale, as if she'd been holding her breath for days. Elena Moretti, Dominic said. He didn't make it a question. She looked up at him over her daughter's head, up close. She looked worse than any report could have described. Dehydration had hollowed her cheeks. Her wrists bore raw red marks where ropes had been. The skin rubbed angry and broken. The way she held herself told him more than the bruises. She was tired down to the bone, but still standing, still between danger and her child. You're the man they used to threaten me, she said. Her voice was rough from disuse, but steady. I am Dominic Vale, he said. That's true. Her hand tightened on Arya's shoulder. Your men said your name like a sentence, like if I screamed loud enough. It wouldn't matter because you'd already decided how this ends. A name, Dominic said, is a weapon. He stepped closer and shrugged off his coat. The interior chill of the warehouse bit instantly through his shirt. But he didn't react. He held the coat out to her. She hesitated. I'm not asking you to trust me, he said. Just to stop shaking. He wasn't sure if she'd realized her body was trembling. She looked down at her own hands, as if noticing it for the first time. Then she let go of Arya long enough to take the coat. It settled around her shoulders, swallowing her frame. For a moment, the brutal color of her bruises disappeared beneath black wool. Someone used my name without permission, Dominic said. For that, I am here. And now you'll fix it, she asked. Her eyes were green, sharp even through the exhaustion. They didn't flinch from his. She looked at him the way some people looked at storms with fear. Yes. But also, with an odd, quiet curiosity about how far the damage might go. I don't fix, Dominic said softly. I correct. Their eyes locked. For one charged second. The warehouse seemed to narrow, until it contained only the two of them, one man made of calm violence. One woman held together by sheer will. Fire met ice. And neither backed down. Elena, Arya whispered, tugging at her sleeve. He came. I told you he would. Elena rested a hand on her daughter's hair, her gaze never leaving Dominic's face. Did you? She said. That was a gamble. She walked into La Fortuna, Dominic said. Alone. Told me my men hurt her mother. A flicker of shock moved across Elena's face. Not for his benefit. For Arya's. You went there, she asked. Her voice suddenly harsher. On your own, Arya's chin lifted. You weren't home. He watched something complicated move through Elena's eyes, fear. Pride. Anger. Gratitude, all tangled together. She shouldn't have had to do that. Elena said, looking back at him now. Anger. Sharpening. Her exhaustion. If your people hadn't, which of my people? Dominic interrupted. He turned slightly. His men understood the motion. It was a summons. From the side door. They brought in a man with his hands bound behind his back. His nose was bleeding. One eye had already begun to swell. His shirt was stained at the collar with sweat. Marco Denton, outer circle enforcer, trusted enough with muscle. Never trusted with decisions. Dominic watched Elena's face as she recognized him. The fear that flashed there wasn't the fear of pain. It was the fear of memory. That one, she whispered. He's the one. Marco lifted his head. Eyes darting from Dominic to the woman. To the child, half hidden by her coat. Boss, he started. The single word cracked on his tongue. Dominic didn't raise his voice. He didn't step closer or pull a weapon. He took one slow step to the side. Enough to place himself between Marco and Elena. A barrier made of tailored cloth, and something heavier. You had access to my warehouse, Dominic said. To my roots. To my colors. That is not a small thing. Marco swallowed, his throat moving visibly. I was protecting our... Did I authorize a kidnapping? Dominic asked. The question slid through the air like a knife hidden in velvet. Marco hesitated. It was the wrong choice. No. He finally muttered. But she, what Dominic pressed. She saw you doing your job. Marco's eyes flickered. His breathing quickened. She saw me at the back of the truck. He admitted. Boxes were open. I thought she'd go to the police. I couldn't let she saw you stealing. Elena cut in. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through Marco's rambling like a clean break. You were taking boxes off the truck that didn't belong to you, marking them damaged. I saw you. That's what this is about. Dominic's jaw tightened. So that was it? Not operational security. Not law enforcement risk. Personal theft. Under his roof. In his colors. And you used my name to cover it. Dominic said. Marco's eyes snapped back to him. Panic flaring now. I was protecting your business. He tried again. If she talked, Dominic took another step. Slow and deliberate. Until he stood directly over him. The difference in height, in presence, turned Marco into something small and unimportant. You made a child believe I would harm her mother, Dominic said. He didn't say it loudly. Soft words could carry a heavier weight when spoken by the right mouth. Marco's breath hitched. His pulse visibly jumped in his throat. Boss Dominic. I didn't think she'd actually. That's the problem. Dominic said. You didn't think. You just used the closest hammer you had. My name? Silence settled again. One of the guards shifted. Restless. Then went still, when Dominic's gaze flicked toward him. He turned back to Elena. How long did he keep you here? He asked. 2 days. She said. Maybe a little more. Hard to tell with no windows. You were tied? He asked. She lifted her wrists. The skin was raw, bruised in rings that told their own story. Rope. Tight. Too tight. My men cut me loose when they realized you were coming. She said. Apparently, fear travels faster than orders. A faint, humorless smile touched the corner of her mouth at her own remark. It vanished quickly. Did he hurt you beyond that? Dominic asked. Her eyes flickered briefly away. Then back. He knows how to use his fists without leaving anything too permanent. She said. Except time. I won't get that back. Arya clung tighter to her. You're going to kill him. Aren't you? Elena asked, looking at Dominic with unnerving directness. Yes. Dominic said. There was no threat in it, just a statement of weather. Of gravity. Of cause and effect. He looked over his shoulder. His men didn't need instructions spelt out. Clean the rot was a phrase they understood, in practice, more than theory. The air in the warehouse thickened with anticipation. The kind that usually preceded screams. Elena stepped forward. Wait. The word hung between them. Dominic turned his head back to her slowly, as if she had just put a hand on the wheel of something very large and very old. Her eyes were steady, her shoulders squared beneath his coat, fabric swallowing the tremor in her frame. Before you punish him, she said, answer me something. She didn't sound like a prisoner. She sounded like someone cross-examining a man on the witness stand. Is your anger for justice? She paused. Or your pride? The question hit harder than any accusation. The warehouse seemed to grow quieter. If that was possible, even Marco stopped breathing. Trapped momentarily in the strange gravity of the moment. Dominic regarded her. He had been asked a lot of questions in his life about loyalty, about money, about alliances, about risk. None of them had reached quite this deep, quite this quickly. Justice or pride? The ugly truth? The one he rarely stepped close enough to touch. Was that in his world, the two often braided together so tightly that pulling them apart was like trying to separate strands of smoke. He looked at Marco, trembling, eyes wet now with the dawning recognition of his own mortality. He looked at Arya, watching him with a child's devastating clarity. He looked at Elena, bruised and unbowed, wearing his coat like armor she hadn't asked for. He thought of his name in Marco's mouth, used as a threat, a lie wearing his face. He thought of a little girl riding 3 buses to put her hand on his lapel and ask him to be what people whispered he wasn't fair. When he finally answered, his voice was quieter than before. I'm still learning the difference, he said. Something in the air shifted. Not for his men, they would still carry out the order, because the organization demanded it. Not for Marco, his fate hadn't changed. But for Dominic himself, something subtle and dangerous cracked. Until that moment, punishment had always been a tool, a lever to keep the machine running. Now, for the first time in a very long time, he felt the edge of it against his own hand. If he moved from pride alone, he would become exactly what Marco had told Elena he was. If he moved from justice, he had to confront not just the man who had misused his name, but the system that had made it so easy to do. He looked back at Elena. Her gaze didn't soften, but something in it acknowledged the honesty. She had demanded an answer, and he had given her one, without hiding behind power. Arya shifted at her side, pressing closer to her mother. Her small face turned up toward Dominic, as if trying to understand what had just changed without having words for it. For the first time that night, Dominic had the strange, unsettling sensation that this wasn't just about cleaning up someone else's mess. It was about deciding what kind of man he chose to be with the power he already held. And that, he realized, was far more dangerous than any gun in the room. La Fortuna went back to pretending it was just a restaurant. The glasses were polished, the linens pressed, the conversations careful and smooth. The regulars returned to their favorite tables and their favorite lies. The staff moved with the easy rhythm of people who had decided that survival depended on not asking too many questions. But the story had already leaked out. People whispered about a little girl who'd walked into the lion's den and tugged on his mane. They whispered about the boss, who had left his dinner to follow her into the dark. Some said it proved he had a code. Some said it proved he had a weakness. Dominic ignored the whispers. He kept his appointments. He signed the papers slid in front of him. He sat at his usual table, in his usual corner, listening to the usual reports. The machine kept turning. And still, something small and persistent had shifted inside him, a stone in the shoe of his certainty, refusing to be shaken loose. 3 days after the warehouse, the hostess approached his table with a different kind of hesitation. Not the nervousness of someone carrying bad news, but the alertness of someone holding a message she didn't understand. "Mr. Vale," she said quietly. "There's a woman asking for you. She said you'll remember her." He already knew who it was before she finished the sentence. "Send her in," he said. Elena Moretti appeared in the doorway. Not as a captive, not as a victim, but as a woman who had decided to walk into danger on her own terms. The bruises were fading now. Yellow had crept in at the edges of purple. She wore a simple black dress, clean and pressed. The coat she wore wasn't his this time. It was hers, cheaper fabric, but chosen. Her posture had changed too. Less about surviving the next second, to more about deciding what she wanted to say with this one. She carried something long and narrow wrapped in dark cloth. She stopped at his table and waited. "You came back," Dominic said. It wasn't surprise. It was observation. "I brought something that belongs to you," she replied. He gestured to the chair across from him. She sat, but not lightly. She sat like someone taking a stand. Even in a chair. She laid the wrapped object on the table and folded the cloth back with careful hands. A violin bow lay between them. It had been damaged once he could see the faint, almost invisible scars in the wood where impact had splintered it. Now the surface shone with a satin finish. The curve was even. The hair was straight and white. Perfect tension from end to end. "My men found it in his apartment," Elena said. "Marco must have taken it from my workshop the night he grabbed me. Maybe he thought he could sell it. Maybe he just liked the idea of holding something delicate he hadn't earned." She shrugged one shoulder. "Either way, they returned it, and I repaired it." Dominic picked it up. He had held weapons that cost more than some houses. He had signed contracts worth more than this entire restaurant. He had broken bones and futures with less thought than most people gave to breakfast. But he held the bow like it might crack if he breathed too hard. "It was worse than it looks now," she said. "Hair torn. Wood split here. Near the tip. The kind of damage that makes most people say, "Throw it away." Most people, he repeated. Broken things can work again. Elena said quietly. If someone decides they're worth saving. He studied the smooth line of the wood, the way the light slid over it. He saw the work, even if he didn't understand the technique. Hours of sanding, gluing, re-stringing. Patience applied in layers, until something broken could sing again. You're not afraid to sit with me, he said. It wasn't arrogance, it was genuine confusion. Fear wastes time, she replied. I've had enough of that stolen already. His mouth tugged slightly at one corner. Not quite a smile. You look at me like I'm human, he said. You rescued a stranger, she answered. You listened to a child. Humans do that. Men like me, Dominic said, are not usually cast as human in stories like this. Maybe people need better stories, Elena said. He watched her as she spoke, not just the words, but the way she delivered them. There was no tremor in her voice now, no careful tiptoeing around him. She had looked his worst in the face, and lived. It gave her a kind of immunity most people never earned. I don't know how to be someone a child should trust, he admitted. He didn't know why he said it. The thought had been bouncing around in the dark corners of his mind since the warehouse. But he hadn't said it out loud to anyone. Aria's face had done that, the way she looked at him afterward. Like he had balanced the scales of her world just enough for her to stand on them again. Elena tilted her head slightly. Start by learning, she said. Start by trying. He absorbed the words the way dry ground absorbs rain slowly, with reluctance, but unable to reject it once it has fallen. I'm not a man who learns, he said. I'm a man who decides, who removes, who replaces. How has that been working for you? She asked. He almost laughed. But there was no humor in it. It's kept me alive, he said. Living isn't the same as being alive, she replied. He went quiet at that. Around them, the restaurant kept moving. Waiters took orders and refilled glasses. Someone laughed too loudly at the bar. A couple clinked champagne flutes together and murmured about anniversaries. At every other table, the illusion of normalcy held. At this table, something else was happening. He set the bow down carefully. Why bring this to me? Dominic asked. You could have kept it. Sold it. Used it. I could have. She agreed. But it was taken in your name. That makes it part of your story, whether you like it or not. You think in stories, he said. I restore instruments, she answered. Every crack tells one. I just decide whether the story ends in the trash or in someone's hands again. He considered that. You realize, he said slowly, that 5 people are dead because of what you saw behind that truck. Her fingers tightened briefly on the edge of the table. I assumed as much, she said. Your men wouldn't say. But absence speaks loudly. Marco, Dominic said. And 4 others who either helped him or stayed quiet while he stole from me. That's a high price for watching someone move boxes, she murmured. The price wasn't for watching, he said. He leaned forward, voice lowering. It was for the lie, he told after. For borrowing my name. For making you and your daughter believe I ordered your suffering. That I cannot allow. She studied him for a long moment. So I should feel grateful, she said. That my pain cleaned up a problem in your organization. No, he said at once. You should feel whatever you feel. Gratitude isn't a currency I trade in. She looked surprised by the speed of his answer. You survived something you shouldn't have had to face. He continued. Your daughter did something most grown men would never have the courage to do. If anyone owes a debt, it's me. You? She asked, incredulous. A mafia boss, talking about owing anything to anyone. He held her gaze. Power, without accountability, is just a fancy word for rot, he said. You exposed some of mine. She sat back slightly. The line of her shoulders, easing by a fraction. Arya keeps asking about you, she admitted. Every night. Is he making sure we're safe? Is the man from the restaurant watching? I have to decide what to tell her. And what have you decided? Dominic asked quietly. That depends, she said. Are you the man who built the kind of system that allows what happened to us? Or the man who walked into his own warehouse to tear out the infection? I'm both, he said. The difference is which one I let make the next decision. Her eyes softened. Just a little. Then let the one who walked into the warehouse keep choosing, she said. The other one has had enough turns. He found himself wanting to argue, if only to maintain the shape of the person he had been for so long. But he didn't. Instead, he let her words settle alongside his own thoughts, forming patterns he didn't yet know how to read. Days passed. The bow travelled with him, resting on the back seat of his car, then on the console beside him, then hanging from the rearview mirror on a leather loop Elena had added. It swung gently with each turn he took. A slim, constant reminder that not everything broken needed to be thrown away. Eventually, he found himself parked across from a small shop near the river. The building was old brick, the door freshly painted green. A modest brass sign beside it read, Elena Moretti, Stringed Instrument Restoration, through the front window. He saw her. No breeze now. Her hair tied back. A few strands loose around her face. She stood bent over a workbench. A violin disassembled in front of her. Light from a lamp warmed the wood. Her hands. The air between them. Arya sat in the corner at a small table. Head bent over homework. Feet swinging idly. It looked like another world entirely. He could have driven away. He probably should have. Instead, he took the bow from the mirror and got out of the car. The bell above the door chimed as he stepped inside. It was a ridiculously cheerful sound for a man like him to be walking under. Elena looked up. Something complicated flickered across her face, surprise, wariness, and something that wasn't exactly unwelcome. You found the place, she said. I know every building that changes hands in this city, he replied. And the names behind them. Of course you do, she said. What can I do for you? Mr. Vale. He lifted the bow slightly. You said broken things can work again, he said. If someone decides they're worth saving. I did, she said. Are you here about the bow? Or about something else, maybe both, he answered. She wiped her hands on her apron and came around the bench. Taking the bow from him, she checked the hair, the balance, the curve, the way a doctor might check a pulse. It's holding, she said. Good. I don't like my work failing. I've built my life on the quick, he said. Quick decisions, quick corrections, quick endings. She handed the bow back to him. Restoration is patience, she said. Violence is quick. Protection is slow. He rolled the words around in his head. I don't know how to do slow, he said. Then build something different now, she replied. You're not dead yet. That means you still get a say. From the corner? Arya looked up from her homework. Hi, she said to him, as if they were acquaintances now. I told Mum you'd come. You did, Dominic asked. She said maybe you wouldn't. Arya continued. I said you would. People who listen the first time usually listen again. Elena gave a small, exasperated sigh that didn't hide her affection. She's very generous with your character arc, she said. Children tend to see who we could be, Dominic said. Not just who we are. Then don't disappoint her. Elena answered. Or, I'll add your name to the list of things I don't restore. Time blurred after that. Some afternoons he stood by her workbench while she explained how sound traveled through wood. How grain direction mattered. How too much pressure could crush what it was meant to enhance. He listened. Not because he cared about violins, but because the way she talked about them sounded dangerously like the way he should have been talking about his own world all along. Arya would sit nearby, doing math problems and occasionally asking him impossible questions about right and wrong with the bluntness only children possessed. He never gave her the easy answers. She seemed to respect that. Weeks later, on a night when the air had turned sharp enough to sting the lungs, Elena flipped the sign on her front door to closed and stepped outside. She froze when she saw him waiting by his car. The bow hung from his rearview mirror, swinging gently in the cold wind. You going to wear that thing out? She said. It seems to be holding. He replied. She folded her arms. Not from defensiveness this time, but against the chill. You said broken things can be restored. He said. Yes. She said simply. He looked at her, and something in his expression was different. The usual calculation was still there. The weighing of angles and outcomes. But it had been pushed back by something rawer. I'm trying to figure out, he said slowly, whether I need fixing or forgiving. The admission surprised even him. Elena took a single step closer. Her breath fogged the air between them. Both, she said. But you're choosing the right direction. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. She turned back toward the door and unlocked it again. The key clicking gently. Light spilled out. Warm and golden. Onto the sidewalk. She paused on the threshold and looked back over her shoulder. For what it's worth, she said. Arya already decided you can be trusted. Try not to prove her wrong. Children don't forget that kind of disappointment. I'll keep that in mind, he said. She went inside. The door closed softly behind her. The sign flipped to close it again. But the light stayed on. He watched her move through the shop. A shadow among instruments waiting for their second chance. For the first time in years, Dominic Vale stood in the cold and felt his breath fog the air in front of him. Not as a reminder of how harsh the world was, but as proof that something inside him was still warm enough to register the change in temperature. He looked up at the bow, swaying from his mirror. Not a trophy, not a souvenir. A promise. Maybe. That some things didn't have to be replaced. That some things, with enough patience, could be fixed. He slid into the car but didn't start it right away. He sat there, watching the glow from Elena's workshop, listening to the faint echo of his own heart beating in a way that felt unfamiliar. Hope, he realized, was a dangerous thing for a man like him to hold. But as the bow swayed gently with the movement of his hand on the wheel, he decided he was willing, for once, to take that risk. Thank you for staying with this story all the way to the end. If Dominic and Elena's journey moved you even a little, let me know. Tell me in the comments what part touched you the most, Arya's courage, Elena's strength, or Dominic's quiet transformation. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves emotional, slow burn, mafia romances. Your support helps me continue bringing you stories that feel alive. I can't wait to read your thoughts below.